Imagine Tokyo rush hour, 1995. Thousands of commuters packed into subway cars. But this morning, they're inhaling something far deadlier than exhaust fumes, sarin gas. A nerve agent so potent a single drop can kill. This isn't some dystopian thriller. This was a calculated act of terror orchestrated by a group calling themselves Aum Shinrikyo. Get ready for some truly disturbing details and thought-provoking insights. Today we're diving deep into one of the darkest chapters in modern history, the Tokyo subway sarin gas attack.
A terrifying event.
It really is. And we're going beyond just the headlines. We're going to rewind the clock back to March 20, 1995, and really try to grasp the sheer terror of that day, to relive it in a way.
You know what's really captivating about this group? And I say captivating, obviously with a very heavy heart considering, the tragedy they inflicted. But it's their journey. They start as this seemingly harmless group of yoga and meditation enthusiasts, and then they transform into a doomsday cult, responsible for one of the most horrifying acts of terrorism in recent history, the Tokyo subway sarin gas attack.
And that's what we're diving into today. Aum Shinrikyo's journey from obscurity to, a powerful militarized organization, a group that even attracted some of Japan's, you could say, brightest minds.
Yeah, and, it's hard to grasp how a group, they preach this blend of Buddhist and Hindu teachings. How did they gain the resources, the influence to, really infiltrate Japanese society so deeply?
It is pretty amazing. Well, let's start with, the man at the center of it all.
Yeah.
Shoko Asahara, the founder. How did Asahara take Aum Shinrikyo beyond, just another spiritual group? How did they get such a strong foothold in Japanese society?
Asahara, he was incredibly strategic. He understood that to achieve his goals, he needed more than just, devoted followers. He needed power, real-world influence.
So how did he get that? Did he, start businesses or lobby politicians? What did he do?
He did something even more audacious, I'd say. He went straight to the people, using, the media to build up Aum's presence and legitimacy, books, articles, lectures, and get this, he even secured a spot for Aum on television.
Wait, they had a TV show?
Oh, yeah. They got a show on a local station. It was called Aum Shinrikyo's Fun. Hard to believe, right?
Wow, that's wild. What kind of show was it? Were they, chanting and meditating on TV?
Not exactly. It was a mix, really. They had these discussions on spiritual topics, showed footage of their activities, and even had interviews with Asahara himself.
So it was part infomercial, part, propaganda.
Yeah, you could say that. It was a really clever way to get to a larger audience, present a more, palatable image. They wanted to seem mainstream, even trendy.
Was this TV show their only venture into, the media landscape?
They were on other popular TV programs regularly. Asahara, he became a recognizable face, even debating religious scholars and commentators.
Wow, he was going head-to-head with some established figures in Japanese society.
Yeah.
That's a bold move.
Yeah, it was, and it worked. People started paying attention. Asahara, he had these unconventional views, a charismatic personality, and he kind of became a media sensation, projecting this image of, intellectual and spiritual authority.
So it sounds like a calculated strategy to, gain legitimacy and influence.
Oh, absolutely, it was. Asahara knew to be taken seriously, he had to be seen as more than just some fringe figure. He wanted Aum Shinrikyo to be seen as a legitimate force in Japanese society. And the media, that was his tool. This media attention, he used it to get donations to recruit new members. Asaharam's wealth and influence it kept growing.
Wow, so it wasn't just about spreading their message, it was about building, their base of power.
Right, exactly. The money, the influence they got through their media presence, it allowed them to, expand their operations, businesses, property, even their own commune.
It is fascinating and a little bit chilling how they managed to, infiltrate Japanese society so effectively. It wasn't about, brainwashing vulnerable people. It was this strategic campaign to gain power and influence at a societal level.
And that's what makes Aum Shinrikyo's story, so compelling and so terrifying, right? It's a reminder that dangerous ideologies can hide in plain sight, packaged as something seemingly harmless, even trendy.
Okay, so we've seen how Asahara used the media, carefully crafted persona, to build up Aum's profile, to attract these followers. But how did this group of spiritual seekers become a militarized force? One capable of carrying out that horrific sarin gas attack. I mean, what was the turning point?
Asahara's ambition, it wasn't limited to, spiritual leadership. He craved worldly power, and he saw Aum Shinrikyo as, well, his way to get it. The group, they went through a gradual shift, but it was a significant one. They started mirroring a government structure, departments dedicated to specific function.
So they weren't just, meditating and chanting anymore.
Oh, no. They had factories, they were amassing wealth, and most alarmingly, they were stockpiling weapons. They were transitioning from spiritual seekers to a force focused on control and dominance. And this shift, this move towards militarization, it was fueled in part by this growing sense of paranoia and persecution within Aum.
Oh, so he was creating this siege mentality, like painting Aum as the underdog, the righteous underdog, fighting against these powerful forces.
Exactly, yeah. He convinced his followers that they were in this cosmic battle, this battle against evil, and violence was necessary for their survival, but also for the eventual salvation of all humanity.
This is some seriously heavy stuff. And if you're finding this exploration of cult tactics as gripping as I am, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the Cult Report channel for more. We're shining a light on the dark underbelly of manipulation, and there's a lot more to uncover. This is where the yoga mats are replaced with gas masks, where spiritual retreats become training grounds for something far more sinister.
Exactly. Think about it. Aum Shinrikyo began recruiting scientists, doctors, engineers, individuals with very specialized knowledge and skills, not for peaceful purposes, but to build a terrifying arsenal.
This is almost unimaginable. A cult with its own laboratories, producing weapons of mass destruction like sarin gas. It sends chills down your spine. I mean, their goals were no longer about spiritual enlightenment. They were about power. They were about control, the destruction of anyone who stood in their way.
And Aum Shinrikyo wasn't just a group of fanatics either. They were a well-organized entity with factories, stockpiles of weapons. They even sought to acquire a nuclear weapon. They had morphed into a force to be reckoned with, operating with chilling efficiency.
And that brings us to March 20, 1995, a date etched in history for all the wrong reasons. This was the day Aum Shinrikyo unleashed their terror upon the Tokyo subway system.
Tokyo, a city that's usually so vibrant, so full of life, known for its order and safety, to see it transformed into a scene of just unimaginable chaos and fear, it's hard to even picture.
I know, and it all began during morning rush hour. Can you imagine?
Just packed subway cars, people heading to work, students on their way to school, the typical Monday morning hustle.
Right, just an ordinary day.
But under the surface, this meticulously planned attack was about to unfold. Members of the Aum Shinrikyo cult, disguised as everyday commuters, boarded 5 different trains across 3 subway lines, each one carrying a package that seemed totally harmless, just a plastic bag wrapped in newspaper.
But inside,
liquid sarin.
And sarin, as many of you know, it's a nerve agent. Colorless, odorless, and absolutely lethal. I mean, even the tiniest amount can totally disrupt your nervous system, leading to paralysis and death.
And their plan was simple, really. Puncture the bags, release the sarin, and just vanish in the panic.
So they targeted the heart of Tokyo's transportation network. They wanted to cause as many casualties as possible and just throw the entire city into chaos.
It was a well-orchestrated attack.
And those first signs of trouble, they were so subtle. Some commuters started experiencing blurry vision, others felt nauseous, some had trouble breathing.
Most probably just dismissed it as fatigue.
Like it was nothing serious. But within minutes,
everything changed. People began collapsing, gasping for air, their bodies just seized up with these uncontrollable spasms. The sarin was taking hold, silently and invisibly. It turned a normal commute into a nightmare.
It's terrifying to even think about. All those people trapped in those packed train cars, coughing, struggling to breathe, panicking as they realized that something was terribly wrong, and that odorless, colorless gas, it made it impossible to even know where the danger was coming from.
Adding to the confusion and fear, it was chaos.
And many passengers, while already succumbing to the effects of the sarin, they somehow managed to stumble out of the trains and onto the platforms.
But they were spreading the contamination without even realizing it.
So the platforms became just absolute pandemonium. People collapsing, others desperately trying to escape this invisible threat, and then others Totally unaware of the danger, they're rushing into the affected stations.
Right, just adding to the chaos.
And the emergency response, it was delayed because no one knew what was happening.
No one knew what they were dealing with.
First responders, not knowing about the sarin gas, they rushed into the stations, putting themselves at risk.
Valuable time was lost as authorities tried to figure out what this invisible enemy was. It wasn't until hours later that they finally confirmed it was sarin, a terrifying discovery that sent shockwaves through the entire city and, honestly, the world.
Imagine the terror, the sheer horror of that day. Over 5,000 people injured, some permanently disabled from the sarin's effects. If you're finding this as gripping as we are, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell to get notifications for new episodes. We're just scratching the surface of this incredible story.
And what's really haunting is that many victims didn't die right away. Some lingered for days, even weeks, their bodies slowly shutting down as the sarin attacked their nervous systems.
It left a permanent scar on Tokyo. The subway, once a symbol of the city's modernity and efficiency, it became a place of fear.
The attack was more than just a physical assault, as a psychological blow. It shook the very foundations of Japanese society.
Absolutely. And as the dust settled and the scale of the attack became clear, this wave of fear and uncertainty just gripped Japan. How could this happen in a country known for its safety and order? What did it say about the dark side that was lurking beneath the surface of Japanese society?
The media went into a frenzy trying to make sense of the chaos and report on the unfolding crisis. Images of victims, stricken and helpless, they filled TV screens across the country, bringing the horror of the attack into every home.
And the police, they launched a massive manhunt. They were desperate to identify and apprehend the people responsible.
And their investigation led them to a group that, up until then, had been mostly dismissed as just a fringe religious sect. Aum Shinrikyo.
This was a turning point. The attack forced the world to confront the chilling reality of Aum Shinrikyo. Not just a group of eccentric spiritual seekers, but a dangerous cult capable of orchestrating mass murder.
A terrifying realization. The scale of this attack, it sent shockwaves throughout Japan. This wasn't just some random act of violence. This was a meticulously planned operation targeting innocent people.
And the fact that they used sarin, a weapon of mass destruction, it just added this whole other level of fear. People were terrified, not just of the immediate threat, but of the possibility of more attacks. What if this was just the beginning?
Exactly. It exposed a vulnerability that, many in Japan hadn't really considered before. It shattered this image of Japan as a safe haven, a place where this kind of horrific violence just didn't happen.
And then those police raids on Aum Shinrikyo compounds all across the country, they just intensified that feeling of unease. What they found was like something out of a nightmare. Hidden labs, stockpiles of chemicals, enough sarin to potentially kill thousands more.
It became clear that the subway attack, it wasn't an isolated incident. Aum had been preparing for something much bigger, much more devastating. They had blueprints for attacks on government buildings, plans to spread sarin through ventilation systems, and they even had aspirations to acquire nuclear weapons.
What about the sarin gas itself? You mentioned earlier that it's a nerve agent. Explain exactly how it works and why it's so deadly.
Of course, sarin is what's known as an organophosphate. It disrupts the nervous system by interfering with an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase.
Okay.
This enzyme is crucial for breaking down a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which is responsible for transmitting signals between nerves and muscles.
So without getting too technical, sarin basically throws a wrench into the communication system that controls your muscle.
And the result is this cascade of terrifying symptoms: muscle twitching convulsions, respiratory failure paralysis, and ultimately death.
It's a horrific way to die. And what makes sarin even more insidious is that it's incredibly potent. Even a tiny amount can be lethal. It's a sobering reminder of the destructive power of chemistry when it falls into the wrong hands.
Profound. This was a case where highly educated scientists and engineers used their knowledge to create weapons of mass destruction. It raised all sorts of ethical questions about the responsibility of scientists, the potential for their knowledge to be misused.
It's a reminder that we need to be mindful of the potential consequences of scientific discoveries and to ensure that they're used for the betterment of humanity, not for its destruction.
Absolutely. We can't simply ignore or demonize science because of its potential for misuse. Instead, we need to foster a culture of responsibility, ethics, and critical thinking in the scientific community and in society as a whole.
And it's not just about preventing another sarin attack. It's about building a society that is resilient, informed, and resistant to the seductive allure of extremism and violence.
It's about being vigilant, informed, and engaged, and about creating a world where critical thinking and empathy are valued above blind faith and obedience.
Don't forget to subscribe to Cult Report so you don't miss out on future episodes. It's like having a crew you can trust. People who can help you spot those red flags and navigate the choppy waters of belief systems.
As investigators began to unravel the web of Aum Shinrikyo's operations, the scope of their depravity became horrifyingly clear. This wasn't a random act of violence, but the culmination of years of meticulous planning, manipulation, and descent into this terrifying abyss of extremism. To really understand the motivations behind these horrific acts, I think we need to delve into the minds of the people who carried out Asahara's vision. So let's take a closer look at the key figures in this dark, dark saga.
Let's start with the puppet master himself, Shoko Asahara.
Asahara's story is a study in ambition and manipulation. Born into poverty, struggling with physical limitations, and then experiencing social isolation, he craved power, craved control, and Aum Shinrikyo became his vehicle to achieve that.
He was incredibly adept at playing the role of spiritual guru and apocalyptic prophet, and he tapped into these deeply rooted cultural anxieties, and he exploited them to gain followers. Like he knew how to push people's buttons.
Right, he was a master manipulator, using this mix of intimidation, charisma, and spiritual teachings to bind his followers to him. He created a closed system, isolating them from the outside world, controlling information, and demanding absolute obedience. He became the sole source of truth, the only voice they were allowed to hear.
So he positions himself as this modern-day Messiah, promises salvation from this impending apocalypse. And to his followers, he's a beacon of hope in a world that they see as just chaotic, morally corrupt, like he offered them a life raft, but in a very, very stormy sea.
And his charisma was undeniable. He cultivated this image of spiritual authority with those flowing robes, the long beard, the hypnotic gaze, claimed to have achieved the highest level of enlightenment, which solidified his control. Really a persona carefully constructed to inspire awe and obedience.
But underneath all that, underneath that facade of spirituality, Asahara was weaving this web of manipulation. It's like he was crafting a psychological poison, like a system of control to bind his followers completely. It wasn't just about belief, it was about absolute obedience.
And what's truly chilling is who he attracted, right? Highly educated individuals, scientists, doctors, engineers, people you wouldn't typically associate with a cult. I mean, think about that for a second. These are individuals trained in logic, critical thinking, and yet they fell under his sway. It really speaks volumes about the power Asahara wielded.
Well, he offered them purpose, a chance to apply their skills in a way that felt meaningful, especially in a society where conformity and societal expectations are paramount. He made them feel like they were part of something much bigger, this select group destined to save the world.
Yeah, he weaponized their knowledge, their skills. They built labs, experimented with dangerous substances, and ultimately, they developed a deadly nerve agent, sarin gas. It's almost like he took their brilliance and just twisted it, turned it into a tool for this dark agenda.
So you can picture this research lab, right, filled with this cutting-edge equipment, not used to cure diseases, not used to advance technology, but to create weapons of mass destruction. And we're not talking some ragtag group either. They were very highly organized, almost like a shadow government operating beneath the surface of Japanese society.
Yeah, and they weren't content with just existing in the shadows, though. They had a plan, and a terrifying one at that. I mean, their goal was to purify the world, to cleanse it of what they saw as evil. And to them, that meant mass destruction, chaos, and the rise of their own twisted utopia.
And it's just a chilling reminder of how dangerous blind faith can be, how a charismatic leader can warp the minds of even intelligent, even educated individuals. It just makes you wonder, how could this happen?
It's just hard to fathom.
I know.
How someone so intelligent could be swayed by Asahara's apocalyptic ideas.
It really is.
Right.
But that's the insidious thing about cults.
Yeah.
They can appeal to the smartest people.
Right.
By offering them a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, and even intellectual stimulation. His followers, they weren't just disciples. They were tools in this grand scheme. Pawns to be sacrificed in his pursuit of power and his twisted vision. And one of his most trusted pawns was Hideo Murai, his chief scientist.
And Murai was brilliant, a brilliant physicist, a man of logic and reason. Yet even he fell under Asahara's spell. He oversaw Aum's chemical weapons program, believing it was necessary to protect the cult and fulfill their apocalyptic destiny.
It's a chilling reminder that intelligence and education, they don't necessarily protect you from manipulation, especially when a charismatic leader presents a narrative that offers meaning and purpose.
It really is. Murray's story is just a tragedy of wasted potential, this brilliant mind corrupted by this dangerous ideology, which ultimately led to his demise. In 1995, he was attacked and killed by a right-wing extremist, almost a grim foreshadowing of the violence to come.
Then there's Masami Tsuchiya, the chemist who actually synthesized the sarin gas used in the attack.
Yeah, Tsuchiya. Quiet, introverted, intensely focused on his work. He wasn't driven by religious fanaticism or this desire for power, but by, I think, a fascination with chemistry and the challenge of creating something new.
It's almost as if he was detached from the moral implications of his actions, seeing the sarin gas simply as this complex chemical compound, like a puzzle to be solved.
A tragic figure. A scientist whose skills were twisted and used for unimaginable evil. He was sentenced to death for his role in the attack and remains on death row to this day.
And we can't forget Tomomitsu Nimi, Asahara's loyal bodyguard and enforcer. He was the muscle, responsible for maintaining order within the cult and carrying out Asahara's brutal directives.
Yeah, Nimi was fiercely loyal to Asahara, viewing him as a divine figure, a savior worthy of absolute obedience. He played a key role in the cult's more violent activities, including the disposal of bodies and the planning of attacks. He was the embodiment of Asahara's ruthlessness.
And he was a stark contrast to Murai and Tsuchiya. Not a scientist, not an intellectual, but a man of action, driven by blind faith in Asahara and a willingness to do whatever it took to protect the cult.
Yeah, and then there's Fumihiro Joyu, kind of the public face of Aum Shinrikyo, articulate, intelligent. He was capable of presenting this seemingly rational and measured defense of the cult's teachings.
So he was the one who interacted with the media, trying to portray Aum Shinrikyo as this peaceful spiritual organization, even as they were secretly developing weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah. And Joyu's story is particularly intriguing because he managed to distance himself from the most violent aspects of Aum Shinrikyo and reemerged as the leader of Aleph. It's a successor group that claims to have renounced Asahara's teachings.
But Aleph remains under very close scrutiny by the Japanese authorities. And many question whether Joyu has truly abandoned that dangerous ideology that led to those horrific events in 1995.
And these are just a few of the many individuals that were drawn into Aum Shinrikyo's web. Each had their own motivations, their own vulnerabilities, and their own stories of how they became entangled in this dark chapter of Japanese history. And their stories converge on this single, chilling truth. Even in a modern, technologically advanced society, the allure of extremist ideologies, the promise of belonging, and the power of a charismatic leader can lead ordinary people down a path of unimaginable darkness. Unimaginable darkness. Unimaginable darkness. It really is a chilling truth, But it raises this question, how could this happen? In Japan, a country known for its order and social cohesion, what allowed Aum Shinrikyo to take root and grow?
Yeah, it's a real puzzle. Japan in the 80s and early 90s, they were going through a lot of rapid change, a lot of uncertainty. That economic bubble had burst. People were feeling very vulnerable, anxious about the future. Traditional values were being questioned. And there was just this sense of unease, in the air.
It was fertile ground for a group like Aum Shinrikyo. They offered certainty. They offered belonging in a world that just felt increasingly unstable, and they preyed on people's anxieties. They presented the simplistic worldview where societal ills were blamed on external enemies, and their solution, salvation through their twisted ideology.
And Asahara was brilliant, absolutely brilliant at tapping into those anxieties. He offered this black and white view of the world that really appealed to people feeling lost, feeling disillusioned. Aum Shinrikyo became this exclusive group, lifeboat for the chosen few that would survive this impending apocalypse.
And he was relentless, absolute relentless in his control. He created this psychological fortress, isolating his followers from the outside world, controlled information, dictated their beliefs, punished those who dared to question him. It was a system designed to break down individuality.
Think about the techniques, right? Intense meditation, sleep deprivation, forced confessions, even physical punishments. He would dose his followers with hallucinogenic drugs, further breaking down their resistance, making them more susceptible to his manipulation. It was like a calculated assault on their minds and bodies.
This raises such a crucial point about cults in general. You know, they often prey on the vulnerable, those seeking answers or a sense of belonging, and they offer this false sense of security and this false sense of purpose, while subtly stripping away their followers' individuality and their autonomy.
It's like a spider web. Once you're caught in it, it's just incredibly difficult to break free. The cult, it becomes your whole world, your identity. Leaving means losing everything. Facing the unknown, confronting this possibility that you've been utterly deceived.
Right. And the Aum Shinrikyo story, it serves as a warning, really. It highlights the dangers of blindly following these charismatic leaders. Without engaging in critical thinking, without questioning their motives, we all have a responsibility to be discerning, to look beyond the surface, and examine the underlying intentions of those seeking our trust.
And the scary part is, anyone can be vulnerable to these tactics. It's not limited to a certain type of person. I mean, the need to belong, the search for meaning, the desire for certainty. These are universal human experiences that can be exploited by those with malicious intent.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the involvement of highly educated individuals in Aum Shinrikyo, I mean, it underscores this point. It challenges our assumptions about who is susceptible to extremist ideologies, and it proves that intelligence and education, they are not safeguards against manipulation.
So it's a stark reminder. We have to be vigilant. We have to promote critical thinking, and we have to build a society that values tolerance, values empathy, and open dialogue. We can't afford to be complacent.
Yeah, we need to be aware of the warning signs of cult activity. They often operate in secrecy, they isolate their members from the outside world, and they demand this absolute obedience to a charismatic leader. And they might employ techniques like sleep deprivation, dietary restrictions, and an intense psychological pressure to break down resistance.
And it's important to remember, too, that cults, they're not limited to religion. They can manifest in various forms. Political groups, self-help organizations, even business ventures. You know, the key is a controlling leader demanding unwavering loyalty and using manipulation to maintain power.
So what can we do to protect ourselves and those we care about?
Education is crucial. I mean, we need to understand how cults operate, recognize the warning signs, develop critical thinking skills to evaluate information and make informed choices. It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge.
Yeah, and fostering open communication with family and friends. You know, creating an environment where people feel comfortable sharing concerns and seeking help if they feel pressured or manipulated.
If we suspect someone we know is involved in a cult, we need to approach the situation with empathy and understanding. Avoid confrontation, which can backfire. Instead, focus on building trust, offering support, and providing access to resources that can help them critically evaluate their situation.
Yeah, because remember, cult members often believe they've found the truth. They're resistant to outside perspectives. So patience, understanding, and a willingness to listen, they're essential in helping them break free. It's a delicate process. It requires compassion and careful navigation.
And leaving a cult, that can be traumatic. Leaving former members in need of professional counseling and support, just to process what they've been through and rebuild their lives.
We've explored the origins of Aum Shinrikyo, the psychology of its leader, and the motivations of some of its key members. But what about the aftermath of the attack? How did Japan respond to this unprecedented act of domestic terrorism? And what lessons can we learn from this chilling chapter in history?
Those are questions we'll be tackling in the final part of this deep dive. If you're finding this story as fascinating and disturbing as we are, make sure you've liked this episode and subscribed so you don't miss the conclusion. I think it's time to shift our focus to the aftermath. You know, the sarin attack wasn't just this isolated incident. It casts a long shadow over Japan, shaping its culture, its laws, and I think its psyche. It's hard to imagine the shock and fear that must grip Japan in the wake of such a horrific attack. This complete betrayal of trust, a violent intrusion into the everyday lives of ordinary citizens. What was the immediate reaction?
Well, the attack sent shockwaves through Japan and the world. The Japanese government launched a massive investigation and a crackdown on Aum Shinrikyo. They raided their facilities, uncovering vast stockpiles of chemicals, weapons, and evidence of their plans to carry out even more attacks.
So the curtain was pulled back and the full extent of their operation was exposed.
Exactly. Asahara and his key followers were arrested, and the group was effectively dismantled.
Wow.
The trials were lengthy and complex, but ultimately Asahara and several others were sentenced to death.
It's fascinating to me how a group that managed to operate in secrecy for so long could unravel so quickly once their actions were brought to light. Was there any public pressure to make sure the authorities got to the bottom of this?
Absolutely. The public demanded answers. They wanted to know how this could have happened, how a group like Aum Shinrikyo could have grown so powerful and remained undetected for so long.
It must have been a national trauma, shaking the very foundations of Japanese society.
It was. It shattered the sense of safety and security that many Japanese people had taken for granted. And it raised profound questions about the role of religion, the dangers of charismatic leadership, and the vulnerability of even the most technologically advanced societies to acts of terror.
It's almost like a collective nightmare coming true. This wasn't some external threat or some foreign power. This was homegrown terror orchestrated by people who seemingly integrated themselves into Japanese society.
Exactly, and it sparked a period of intense introspection in Japan. People began to question their own assumptions about security, about the nature of good and evil, about the very fabric of their society.
Did the attack lead to any significant changes in Japanese law or policy?
It absolutely did. The government enacted stricter laws regarding religious organizations, increased surveillance of groups deemed potentially dangerous, and invested heavily in counterterrorism measures.
So a kind of societal awakening, a recognition that even in a country like Japan, known for its order and stability, the potential for darkness and violence exists.
That's a very astute observation. The legacy of Aum Shinrikyo is a sobering reminder that fanaticism, manipulation, and violence can take root anywhere, even in the most unexpected places.
It's a powerful message, and one that's especially relevant in today's world where we see the rise of new cults and extremist groups, both online and offline.
You're absolutely right. The tactics used by Aum Shinrikyo, the manipulation, the isolation, the exploitation of fear and vulnerability are still being used today by groups seeking to gain power and control over others.
It's a reminder that we need to be vigilant to question authority, to be critical of information, and be aware of the warning signs of manipulation both in ourselves and in those around us.
I couldn't agree more. The Aum Shinrikyo story is a dark and disturbing chapter in human history, but it's also a powerful lesson in the importance of critical thinking, ethical awareness, and the need to safeguard our societies from the dangers of extremism and fanaticism.
This has been an incredible deep dive, both fascinating and deeply unsettling. I want to thank our expert for guiding us through this complex and disturbing story.
It's been my pleasure. These are conversations we need to be having.
And to our listeners, if you found this deep dive insightful, please share it with your friends. Leave us a review and hit that subscribe button to join us for more thought-provoking explorations of the world around us. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.